You don't have to do very much DIY before you end up using sealants and adhesives in tube form like these. And you don't have to use these very much before you realise how frustrating it is that you can use just 5 or 10% of a tube like this, then come back to it a few months later and it's all dried up, it's all gunged up, it's completely useless. You throw it away and waste your money. So today I'm going to show you the best way of resealing tubes like this so you can use them time and time again. And for those ones that you've had for too long that have been sitting on your garage shelf, I'm also going to show you how to retrieve the material that is still usable so you don't have to go and buy any more. I'm sure I'm not the only person that gets upset when I can't use the majority of a tube like this just because I've opened it months before and then it's all dried up at the top, knowing full well that 80% of it is still in the tube. I'm sure there's some DIYers that have thrown away more sealant and adhesive in tubes like this than they've ever actually used. But did you know there's products in the market to help us seal tubes like this so we can use them time and time again rather than just throwing them away after their first outing? And also, if you've got a tube of adhesive or silicone that's been kicking around for a long time, the chances are that a lot of it is still usable as long as you can get your hands on it. And I'll show you later on in this video how to do that quite successfully and really get to the point where you can use all the tube without throwing it away. Before we do any of that, let's have a look at some of the traditional ways that us as DIYers like to try to seal our tubes. So this is probably one of the most common. This is a tube of natural silicone that I've used some time ago, and you'll see a screw in the end there. Now, whether it's a screw or a nail, this is pretty much the traditional way of trying to seal that end. But even with the screw out, it doesn't really look like it's getting anywhere at all. If I take the top off, the silicone is still pliable at that end, but this nozzle is completely bunged up. So I'd say that this screw hasn't really helped very much. And I'd say the main reason for that is even if you've got a nice tight fit with your screw and it's just started reacting with the air the minute you've opened it. So whether it's a screw or a nail, you're not going to get a perfect seal. And the other thing that's worth trying is rather than trying to seal the end of the nozzle is to actually seal between the nozzle and the tube. And the best way to do that is get a bit of plastic or sort of cut out from like a plastic carrier bag, pop it over the end and then just screw the nozzle back on, and that will make a really tight seal between the nozzle and the tube. Now that doesn't stop anything in the nozzle here drying out, but that can always be, you can always change out for another nozzle, but it will stop anything in the tube drying out because you've just sealed it right at this interface. The other way a lot of people try to seal tubes is by using some sort of tape, either masking tape or packaging tape like I've got here. However, if the screw or the nail system isn't going to work, then I doubt using tape like this is going to work particularly well either. And obviously what we're trying to achieve here is to keep the air away from the material, whether it's adhesive or silicone, because that's what's going to start drying the material up and then making it go hard and all gungy like we've got. So there are some products, as I said, that are on the market. And the first one I'm going to show you is called the Cork nozzle stopper. Now, I'm not sponsored by any of these people, but you can find all the products that I'm using today on Amazon UK. If you go through my storefront, they're all there with all the links so you can actually look at them for yourself. Now, these ones do two things. First of all, they fit the top so air doesn't get into the nozzle, but also there's this thing that goes all the way down into the tube, so you've got somewhere for the material, whether it's silicone or adhesive, to find its way up and out the nozzle. Let's just open this, see how these fit. Oh, that's quite a tight fit actually. And obviously because it's tapered, then it will fit all kinds of sizes of nozzles. This is about the smallest you get. I've not even cut anything off of this. So it fits this one up to something maybe 1/4 inch, I would say. So that's got quite a nice seal at the top. and you know that it's got a nice route all the way through to the tube. So when you do come to use it again, there should be at least a route for the material to come all the way up. So that's going to stay on there, and I'll see how that works the next time. You need to use some black silicone. So the next one is called Seal a Tube, and it looks a bit like that, and in some ways it's got the same sort of two things going on. First of all, it's got a cover that actually seals around the tube, stopping air getting into the nozzle, but it's also got this prongy thing that finds its way down through the nozzle pretty much into the tube, which will at least mean that there's a route through from the tube through the nozzle up the end. Let's see how this one works. So I've got another tube of anthracite colour silicone sealer here, which just makes it easier to see. And this one, the nozzle's been cut quite a bit bigger because I wanted a bigger bead. So let's see if this seals it. It goes over there like that, and then actually that's quite a nice tight seal. It's the same shape and it's the same taper as the nozzle. You can feel that it's actually sealed quite nicely, and obviously the inside prong goes all the way through and just about goes into the tube. So when you take it off, if that was a few months later, at least you'd still have a route all the way through, even if what's in the tube has now dried up. So that is what they call Seal a Tube. But my favourite has to be the last one. These are called Cork cap covers, and they're my favourite not just because they'll seal any size nozzle, whether it's really, really small or you've cut them back quite a long way to get a large bead, but because they're essentially mini condoms for sealant guns. And they work in exactly the same way as a standard condom. They basically just roll on. So if you've got a sealant gun with quite a large cut nozzle, all you do is put them over the end and then slip them on just like a condom. Or if you've got a really fine nozzle, it just works in exactly the same way. You just slip them down and they just create a seal all the way around, which I think is quite good. And I suppose if you really wanted to, you could even use it on this top, maybe without a nozzle. Yeah, just a micro nozzle. And these can be rolled off as well, so they can be reused on any size. And they just make me laugh, and that's why I like them. These are called Cork cap covers. But whether you're using a product off of Amazon to try to seal your tube, or just a screw or a nail in the traditional sort of DIY way, the one thing I would always suggest having to hand is extra nozzles. These are really easy to pick up in DIY shops or off of Amazon, and it means that if a nozzle does get bunged up because you haven't used it for a little bit, you just throw it away, put a new one on, and it starts working immediately. But what happens if you've got a tube where it's not only started to dry in the nozzle, but it started to actually go off and dry in the tube? It doesn't matter how many nozzles you change, that still doesn't solve the problem. Like some adhesive I've got here. Let me show you this. So this adhesive I used once, maybe 2 years ago, and although it's got a cap on, it's still completely bunged up and dried out. Absolutely nothing is coming out. It's completely done. And even if we take the nozzle off and put it back in the gun, there is nothing coming out at all. It's absolutely solid in there. So it doesn't matter if we change the nozzle, the material's still not going to come out. I just can't get it to shift. And this is where a lot of people will just throw this away because it's completely knackered, it's all bunged up, it's never going to work again. However, what most people don't realise is that the probability is that only that top section has gone off and the rest of it is still okay. I've got the same thing going on with a sealant here, and you can see from the underside I've only used maybe 10–15% of it, yet it's all bunged up because I never put any cap on. It's absolutely solid. It doesn't matter how hard I push, that sealant has gone off. But the probability is that it's only gone off in that top maybe 20 mil. So if we can get our hands on the rest of it, we can reuse that, and there's a really easy way of doing that. Let me explain. And this is the secret, it's an empty cartridge. You can buy these in various places like eBay and Amazon. I've got a link in my storefront for the Amazon version of this. This is a translucent one that I bought so I can see what's happening inside. And essentially I'm going to cut the top off of this and use this top to replicate the bad top on this one where it's all gummed up and it's all dried out, so we can get our hands on the good material down here. So the first thing I need to do is cut this in half. So I cut off the top 50mm or a couple of inches of the empty cartridge and pop the bottom section of that in boiling water for a few minutes. And while that's heating up, I'll get on with the messy bit, which is taking the top of the cartridge that's all dried out and hopefully taking away the plug that's now dried out and stopping the good material from coming out. Now I think it's going to be about there. And this is my DIY version of an American product called Tuber New, which you can actually buy off of Amazon, but it gets flown from the States, so it's quite expensive. It works out to about £3 per cartridge. And obviously you get to a point where you might as well buy a new cartridge rather than buy an empty one to fill it. Carpenters, turn away now. You won't really want to see a tenant saw covered in sealant. There we go. So we'll disregard the plug that's stopping everything come out and then have a bit of a clean up. We can now take the warmed up cartridge end out the hot water, and a corner of a bench is excellent for just flaring this out slightly. Now obviously you can use a heat gun or maybe a flame. I've done this with a simple lighter in the past, but maybe boiling water is probably the safest. And all I'm trying to do is just flare that out to make it a little bit bigger than it used to be. There you go. Because it's now slightly flared out, I should be able to get that over the top of the other tube. Both of these are exactly the same size. Force it on. There we are. Which should be able to fit in my cartridge gun. And now I can actually push it through. It goes into the new nozzle and comes out quite nicely at the end. Just pop a new nozzle on the top there. And there you go. That is coming out like new. So really happy with that. So essentially I've got the old cartridge here with the top cut off, and then just a couple of inches of this new cartridge, and it's just flowing through it as if it's a brand new cartridge. In fact, it does feel nice and fresh as the day I bought it. I better put a top on. Let's just pop a condom on this, just because I think it's funny. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's given you some ideas on how to look after your adhesives and sealants. Remember, go and have a look at my storefront. All the products I've used today are in there so you can have a look at it. I will see you next time.